Are we ready? Are we ready to go, Ariel?
Not quite. Give me a minute. I'm putting us on Facebook, so it'll be about a minute. When I pull down the agenda, that's your cue.
Thank you.
One minute.
The anticipation is thick.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Good. Thank you, Ariel Kubu-Jones, for all of your work in organizing this conversation with fire survivors and, of course, all of our conversations. I'm so glad you joined us tonight for our virtual conversation. I wish we could be in a room together. And some of the folks that you will hear from this evening actually did join us in a room for a number of months after the fires of 2017. So we're delighted to bring you such an experienced panel discussion of folks who lost their home, moved through the debris cleanup, the insurance hassles, onto successful rebuilding, all the while having to acknowledge that it is terribly traumatic and we need to take care of ourselves and the mental health of our families in order to navigate through the challenges that we find, especially now with the holiday season approaching in a few short days, or Hanukkah right now. It's very difficult when you've lost everything and you're trying to recreate family traditions or start new ones. And it's not only losing a home and your possessions, we are in the midst of the COVID pandemic. So it's two mental health and physical challenges that confront us. And I'm delighted that we have some great mental health professionals that can help us navigate through this. And please acknowledge how important your mental health is. I still, 3 years later, I still have a little catch in my voice when I remember what happened that night 3 years ago and the struggles that we've all been experiencing in moving towards recovery and rebuilding. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is televised live on Facebook, and it is archived on YouTube so that you can actually refer your friends and colleagues to the YouTube video or a refresher course if you need it. And if you're with us tonight, it means you're on our list. Whether you're a survivor of the Glass Fire or the Walbridge Fire, we welcome all of you because we all share in the trauma of what we've experienced. But maybe you know folks who really do want to join us for our future sessions. Please have them send their contact information to Ariel Kubu-Jones, my soon-to-be district director in a few months. Pat Gilardi is retiring. Please say it isn't so, but it is so. And so I'm delighted that Ariel is going to be with us and we'll have the experts leading us through the number of months ahead dealing with COVID and fire survivors. So let's get down to it. We advertise or we broadcast this the first and the third Thursdays of January. For example, And so you'll want to be a part of that discussion. And we'll be sharing information from our slides throughout this meeting. And we'll send this information out to our list in the next couple of days so that you have the information that our panel of experts will be providing for us. And I'm not sure whether you caught the board meeting or read the stories, but because of the fire survivors advocacy, we were able to negotiate pretty effectively with PG&E for the for damages from the fires of 3 years ago. And it seems like quite a bit of funding, and it actually doesn't go as far as we hope it would go, but we did allocate a good bunch of it towards a strategic planning for vegetation management in the future and repair of our roads that were horribly damaged and our infrastructure horribly damaged in the fires, and looking ahead, what can we invest in to move us towards resiliency in the future. So I'll be sending out more information about the board's actions from Tuesday, but I did want you to be aware that what we're doing, how we're investing those funds will hopefully help us avoid some of the mega fires and firestorms that we've experienced in the last 3 or 4 years. So a bit of housekeeping tonight. We will have the panel presentations, and go ahead and I need to let you know that the chat function on your Zoom and the question of answers will not be opened up until our panelists have delivered their very important information, and then we'll have a great interactive conversation with you and our experts on our panel tonight. And again, this evening's meeting will be recorded and archived if you want to refer your friends and family members to this recording. And if you do, if we run out of time for your questions, please send them to us at our office, and we'll try to get the questions and answers to you as quickly as possible. So tonight's topic, as I mentioned before, is mental health and dealing with the trauma that we've experienced from 3 years ago and the past couple of years. It never, or it rarely fades, or if it does, it doesn't fade fast enough. So we'll have some of our rock stars from the 2017 fire share a bit about what helped them through to recovery. And as we move through the holidays, it's important to take care of ourselves and others, be generous, be kind, be forgiving of yourself. It is very, very difficult, the experience that we are all going through. It is my pleasure to introduce, first of all, Wendy Wheelwright. She's worked with us and all of our fire survivors from 3 years ago, is an employee of the Sonoma County Health Department. And I'm so glad that you're here from behavioral health. Wendy was such a help to us and to me, and we hope that she will share some of her coping mechanisms that she shared with us. And so, Wendy, let's take it away.
Okay, and Ariel, if you would put my slides up, that would be grand. Thank you. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is the overall impact that surviving a disaster has on a person emotionally and physically, and go a little bit into what we can do to help mitigate some of those impacts. And one of my esteemed colleagues in the field, Nick, he's going to be speaking a little more specifically about some techniques that you can do. So what you're looking at on the screen here is the typical community response in any disaster. And what's unique about a fire is that we don't have that pre-disaster phase. We don't get a warning, especially a rapidly moving fire like we typically have in our counties. We just, you might get a 20-minute, maybe an hour. But if it's moving quickly, that's not a lot of time to think through, what do I want to say? What do I want to pack? How do I get out? And all the while in your mind is that knowledge that everyone else is trying to do the same thing and the roads are congesting. And so the impact is more sudden, it's more stark, and it's more frightening. What we did have in the Tubbs fire, but also in our more recent fires, is we do have a great deal of community cohesion and support of each other when we are in the midst of a disaster. We are lucky that we live in Sonoma County. This is a very warm and generous county. There's a lot of very kind and wonderful people here who will try to reach out and help as best they can. And because there's so much of that in our community, it does take a little bit longer for us to come down that other side into what's known as the disillusionment phase. But nevertheless, we do eventually land there. And that's what's known as the disaster after the disaster. Because that's the reality of, okay, insurance is this much, FEMA's that much, damages are this much. How am I gonna work that out? And that's a rough time to go through, where you're trying to wrestle with becoming an expert on things that you never thought you'd have to become an expert on. Like, I never thought that as a family, we'd have to become expert on septic systems, geotech samples, insurance adjustment, solar paneling, just things that you just never thought going through your day. I'm going to learn so much about permits that I'm going to be sick of it. And all that's on top of your actual life that's still going on, and your actual job and your actual things that you're trying to take care of. So survivors are really busy people. And when they're going through, as a community, when something like this hits us all together, and it impacts a lot of us all at once, then it can have certain effects on us physically and emotionally. And in addition to that, as we're going through it, there's going to be certain triggering events. Every time there's a really strong windstorm, nobody sleeps. Nobody sleeps. My cats spend the night on the ceiling singing all the songs of their people every time there's a really strong windstorm, because even they remember and have a trigger around this. And then, we hit our anniversary reactions and so forth as we're working through the grief and start to rebuild. Now, you notice that the working through the grief part is a year after. This is not a quick process. This is something that takes time. And part of the reason it takes time is because survivors are busy people. And it's not that you don't feel it, it's you do, but you kind of notice that and go, okay, but I've got to get this thing figured out, and I've got to get the cleanup filed, and I've got to talk to the insurance agent. And I know I'm having feelings, but I don't quite have time yet to go into that. So I'm just going to put that on that shelf over there and I'll get to it. And so it takes a while to kind of let all that sort of simmer down. And Ariel, if you'd go to the next slide. So there are 4 ways that this lands on us ultimately. And the first is that it can affect us physically. The second is that it can affect us emotionally. The third is that it can impact the way we think and our ability to think through problems. And the fourth is that it can affect us behaviorally. And so I just want to take each of those 4 things very briefly and talk about them. Would you go to the next slide, please? Okay, and you will now see my sense of humor start to show up. Humor is one of the ways in which I deal with stress. And so you will see this showing up in my slides. If you're anything like me or many others of us, that when we're under pressure, we go into go mode and I've got to get it done, and I make a list and I try to figure it out and I get tasks done and I try to keep on track, and it's the way I get through it. And because of that, I don't feel it fully right away, but my body does. Your body can't stay in go mode indefinitely. And so your body's going to start telling you stuff about how you're feeling. And it usually tells you by giving you a headache, or it might give you stomach aches, or some of the other things that you're seeing on here, like feeling a lot more clumsy and not understanding why your coordination is off, and particularly fatigue, being really tired. It is emotionally exhausting to go through a disaster and to go through the recovery from it. And so the first place that we typically notice it is in our body. Would you go to the next slide, please? The next place we notice it is in our feelings. Now, this is quite possibly my favorite mood chart of all time, because I can't actually tell how you're feeling by looking at you. I have to ask you. And so this might be one of the more accurate mood charts that I've ever seen. But my point there is that there's a lot of different ways to feel about this, and people will do that. Some of us feel anxious about what happened, and we carry that anxiety around like an undercurrent. Some of us feel sad and grieve about it. Some of us feel angry about it. Some of us aren't feeling anything about it yet, and we're wondering what's wrong with us. Some of us feel all of that at the same time, plus guilt on top of it for feeling all of that at the same time. There's nothing wrong with how you are going to feel it. You're going to feel what you're going to feel, and it's going to be your way to do it, and that's okay. But what's challenging about this is that when a disaster hits all of us at once, and so the people that we're used to relying on for emotional support are also going through things. And they're going through it at a different pace or in a different way. And so sometimes what happens is we fall into the trap known as competitive grieving, where how come mine looks different than yours? And that's a trap, and it won't lead us anywhere good. Instead, if we could step back and say, okay, I'm feeling it this way. This person I care about, who I'm used to relying on, is feeling it differently. And that's okay. We're just going to be at a different pace on this. And then maybe we'll switch places in a week. Who knows? And just let that be okay, and give yourself permission and other people permission to just kind of be with what that is. Now, would you go to the next slide, please? All right, this is probably the trickiest piece. The three areas of thinking that are most impacted by a disaster are the ability to concentrate, remember things, and make decisions. And the three skills that I need most to inventory my house is the ability to concentrate, remember things, and make decisions. That is not fair, but that is what happens. And so knowing that that's what happens can help us step back a little bit and say, okay, when I have to do this task of creating my inventory, it's gonna take me longer. And I'm not, it's not because I'm slow, it's not because I don't want to get it done, it's not because I'm weak, it's because I survived something huge. And it's just going to take me longer to do this. And it's just going to be a little bit more emotionally grueling. So in our family, we set a time limit. We never worked on that project more than 20 minutes at a time because it was too heavy to do it. And we just kind of gave ourselves that permission to take the time that it took and to have a lot of helpers help us do it. Next slide, please. So you might relate to this fellow on the screen that we have here. But there are some ways that this can come out behaviorally. It is a very strange mixture of feelings to be both, to have both an increase of gratitude for one's community and their kindness, and also an increase in irritability all at the same time. And that is what happens, is there's that undercurrent of edginess around trying to carry that much stress, but at the same time, there's that undercurrent of gratitude around connection, and it feels like such a contradiction. But there's nothing wrong with you. That's actually fairly typical of going through something like this. But there are some things that happen commonly. For instance, having unexpected crying jags. I call it leaking. That's a very clinical term. You know, I'll just be watching, you know, a Kmart commercial and, blah, you know, just no reason. I just, what was that? And that was I'm leaking. Because stress hormones can only leave the body through either sweat or tears. And so your body will you'll either work it out with exercise or cry it out. So it's going to find a way to leak. Difficulty sleeping is also a typical behavioral response to going through a disaster, which might be why the physical experience of fatigue is so commonly paired to it. All right, if you would give me our next slide. So the last thing I want to touch on is the power of connection. There are several things one can do to try to mitigate the impact, but the most important is our connections to other people. But I'm not talking about just any kind of connection, because there's different levels. So Ariel, would you put up the first level for us here? Thank you. So there are a lot of people that are in my life because I owe them money or they owe me money. This is the transactional level. I engage in commerce on a regular basis and intersect human beings in the course of doing so. But this isn't a place where I can get any level of emotional nurturance per se. It's just me going about life in the world. You put up the next level. Now within that, there are smaller groups that you have a sense of community with. This could be your neighborhood. This could be your church. This could be people you work with. You might feel a sense of community on the job. There's lots of different ways in which we feel community. And at this point, there's that thing that distinguishes communities. There's a sense of belonging that goes with that. Would you put up the next level? Now we're getting into the group of people that I love. But I put conditional to describe this level because if I'm totally honest, there are some people that I absolutely love in my life that only have a tendency to call me when they have a problem. Now, I'm not asking you to raise your hands and say if you know what I'm talking about, but if you refer to your friendship circle as your caseload, you have too many people in this group. And so when I'm talking about connect with someone who nourishes you, I'm talking more about a two-way balanced connection. And I'm not suggesting that you don't have folks like this in your life. I do. I cherish them. I love them. I have some blood family in this circle. But the reality is that they have a tendency to lean on me a little heavier than I'm able to lean on them. And that's just part of the relationship. So Ariel, if you would put up our last circle there, this is what's called the inner circle. These are the ones who love you back in the same way that you love them. The people that you know would walk through the night for you. That's a much smaller list. It's okay that it's a smaller list. But my challenge to you would be think about who made that list for you as we're talking about this. And then call them up and tell them they made the short list and have a conversation that's nourishing to you. Now, if COVID would allow it, I'd say go hang out with them. But since we can't do that right now, do the best you can to virtually hang out because these are the people that fill your soul just as well as you fill theirs. And you're going to need them right now because they're the ones that you can call and say, hey, I just want to have a conversation where I don't talk about the fire. Can we do that? And they can do that. They're also the people you can call and say, I want to have a conversation where I talk about how scared this makes me, but I don't want it to be held against me later. Can you do that? They can do that. So think about your short list, call them up and let them know they made the list. And it will do you a whole world of good. And that is the end of my section. So I'll turn it back. Oh, I lied. There's one more slide. Ariel is keeping me honest here. Self-care is a simple thing, but a hard thing. It's really only these 5 things, but for some reason, they're very hard for us to do. So if I'm honest, I skipped breakfast because I was in a hurry to get to a meeting. I skipped my workout this morning for the exact same reason. I forgot to drink water until after lunch. I haven't slept in 20 years, but I did actually laugh at some of my jokes today, and some of you did too. So I got 1 out of 5. So hey, that's good. This isn't meant to be an exercise in guilt. My suggestion is that you pick one of them and do it just a little bit more because your body will thank you. And as it feels better about that, it will give you more resource to do what it is you need to do right now and to be able to stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish. And now for real, that's the end of my time.
Supervisor Gorin, you're on mute.
You would think I spend my whole day on Zoom, I would understand how to unmute myself, but it is what it is. And Wendy, thank you so much. And I think people will want to refer back to your presentation and your notes once a month, once every couple of months, and we will get through this together. I'm excited to introduce, as I mentioned before, the rock stars of 2017. These are the pros. These are the folks who have emerged through the wilderness intact, was successfully rebuilding and wanting to offer you some lessons that they've learned somewhat painfully along the way. And I'm very excited to introduce Lysbeth Wiggins, Lynn, Garric, and Brad Sherwood. And I don't know which one of you wants to go first, but I work with Brad Sherwood. So I'm going to go to Lumberjack Brad. He's looking like a lumberjack tonight. Brad, you lost your house in the Tubbs fire. So lead us through your recovery.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for having me tonight. And it's great to join this panel of rock stars and fire survivors and speak to our fire survivor community. 2017 really was the tip of the iceberg for our family for many reasons. We ever since moving to Sonoma County in I was in 2005, I believe it was, when Susan brought me on with the water agency. Yeah, or no, you were at the city still, weren't you? Yeah. So we had bought the house here in Larkfield in 2013, and my wife had, if you remember, we had kind of a rough economic recession, so there was a layoff involved. So we were, pulling together our pennies, and we finally bought this awesome, amazing dream house in Larkfield in 2013, and we're just getting it updated and remodeling it. I was going on YouTube, learning how to do home projects myself, which didn't work out very well. And then 2017 came and erased, all of that, all that hard work, the dedication, blood, sweat, and tears that we had invested into our home. But more importantly, the home and stability and security for our kids. And at the time, my kids were 5 and 7. And I think that that definitely, my kids have been the focus of our rebuild story. And my wife and I decided immediately after the fire that, number one, we were going to rebuild. There was no question, there was no doubt. Number two, we were going to ensure that our kids were going to be a part of the rebuild story because of the trauma they went through and the loss they experienced. We wanted them to once again feel rooted in their new home and in our neighborhood and our community. So knowing we were woefully underinsured, I'll never forget meeting with 2 local builders about a month after the fire. And I think that's when I hit my depression mode, was after meeting with those 2 local builders and got the cost to build my home. It was astronomical. And I remember thinking to myself, maybe we can't rebuild. Holy crap, maybe we're gonna have to go move back with our parents. And it was this community spirit and this community pride when several of us in our Larkfield Estates neighborhood all realized the same thing at about the same time, that we pulled our resources together and we said, nope, we're going to do this. We're going to rebuild. And if we have to rebuild with the insurance money we have, we're going to find a way. And that's what we did. We found a builder. We brought the builder in. We did a group rebuild. We developed 5 floor plans. We all picked a floor plan. We worked together to develop a secure budget that worked for everybody. And that's why we were able to successfully rebuild within a year and a half after the fire and be in our homes rather quickly. But we did it in a community neighborhood environment. And I have to say that it was because of that community advocacy and the pooling of resources together amongst our neighborhood that we were able to rebuild. And we were able to do so with our kids being a part of the process. Our builder was allowed the kids, to help build the plan and help reimagine what the landscape was going to look like. Unfortunately, we had to drive by our burned out neighborhood every day to take the kids back to their elementary school, which thank God survived. Somehow, a miracle, the fire went around Wrigley Elementary School. So the kids were able to go to school, but everything around them was burnt down. Everything around them was gone. So what we did is we made sure that the kids saw the progress of the rebuild, and that progress, those sticks going up, was all hope, aspiration. And as a community, we really did a lot to bring energy into our community. We held one heck of a 1-year anniversary Tubbs fire. 1 year after the Tubbs fire, the neighborhood just decided, you know what, we're gonna honor the lives lost, but we're also gonna honor the lives we have today. And we're going to honor the lives lost by celebrating rebuild. And we're gonna rebuild stronger and safer for generations to come. So we had a huge neighborhood block party. We literally had jumpy houses on my cleared lot. We had taco trucks, tri-tip trucks. We had a live band. It was the first time this neighborhood, and this neighborhood was built in 1969, had all come together. This was a sleepy portion of unincorporated county. No MAC, no, other than our board of supervisors, right? Fantastic. There was no real community in Larkfield prior to the Tubbs fire. And James Gore, Mike McGuire, Paul Kelly all agreed that Larkfield was a sleepy portion of the county. Well, not anymore. Man, that fire sparked a rage and a need to be together, that from that 1 year anniversary party, we now get together every other Friday night. Even with COVID, we do it safely. And we do taco truck. The taco truck comes in and the neighbors get together. But most importantly, we get the kids together. And the kids have been able to be in their neighborhood ever since the fire. So they have seen the transformation. They have been a part of the rebuild. And that is, I think, what has kept my wife and I thinking positively about this whole ordeal. Now, I'll just quickly say, I know my time is up here shortly, but personally, how I dealt with this was by keeping busy. I'm a type A kind of guy. And I selfishly knew that I had a lot of contacts within the county, within government. And gosh darn it, maybe I'm here for a reason. Maybe I'm a part of this Wildfire Survivor Club, and I'm going to bring every resource and tool and everything I know to the table to help rebuild our neighborhood and help rebuild our community. So I participated in James Gore's block captain since day one. We met every Wednesday at 7 a.m. for 2 years, developed our neighborhood website, helped develop our first neighborhood community 501c3 to leverage grant funding. And to this day, working with many of you here on advocating to continue making our community fire safe. So I think a lot of people, and I have not, and I should, my wife has, but I have not actually sat down with a counselor. And I always tell myself, I'm going to do that. But my excuse is I'm busy. I got to do these things. I've got to get, these projects up and running. Because in a lot of time is of the essence in a lot of the rebuild activities that we're doing. And there's so much going on. So I will admit that, one of my own personal downfalls, and I say this and I share this because there are, I'm sure, many other people like me. You do need to look in the mirror, and you do need to take time for yourself and carve out the time to seek help. And it's okay to seek help. And I sit on a school board for the Marquess Union School District, and I'll just tell you, I've met with our counselor there unofficially, and what a fantastic resource. And to simply have that face-to-face conversation is so beneficial and helpful. So I definitely encourage wildfire survivors. It's been 3 years, but it's never too late to reach out and get help. And my kids are doing great. I'll tell you one thing, Susan, one thing I totally forgot about in the rebuild process in construction, and I wish I would have added it to my builder's to-do list, was putting the hooks up for the Christmas lights. I totally forgot about having to put hooks up for Christmas lights. So this past year, I was up on the house stringing the lights because we've got it all lit up this year.
And Brad shared with me the house that he lit up, as he called it, the full Griswold.
We are going Griswold. As a matter of fact, our neighborhood is having a decorating drive-through contest. And so this Sunday on the 20th, we're inviting anyone and everyone to come drive through our neighborhood and see all the spectacular lights that we have we've put up. Once again,
Nice.
trying to create that community spirit.
you may just have this supervisor driving through your neighborhood, even though it's not my district. I may just be there.
I'll have some hot cocoa ready for you.
All right, we're ready. Masks and everything. Brad, thank you for sharing. And thank you for everything that you have been doing. Yes, you are a busy guy, but you've been out there advocating for the fire survivors, for vegetation management strategies, for pushing to the limits with the insurance companies and the insurance commissioner. And that's exactly what was needed to buttress and give us confidence that we could get through this. So thank you all so much. And I'm delighted to hear that your kids are doing well. I am most concerned about our children undergoing the trauma. Lysbeth, why don't we go to you next? And I won't steal your thunder, but if you could share, and I love your little Christmas decorations behind you. They look fabulous.
Thank
And
you.
if you could share, well, you might introduce your little friend there, your coworker, and explain to us the trauma of the fire initially, and then the next fire, and now the glass fire. So go ahead and share your story.
All right, well, I want to introduce my daughter, Sarah. This is Sarah Wiggins. And so she's here with me tonight. Sarah's a graduate of Chapman University and majored in psychology with a minor in criminology. I always say it wrong.
I know why.
But anyway, so Sarah's here to support and fill in. I'm like, I'm going to forget. I'm always worried about that. So she fills in for me. So yeah, so we lost our house in the 2017 Tubbs fire. We live in a rural part of off Reedley and Mark West Springs on 12 acres. I had livestock, animals that we pulled out that night. But the big thing is that we also have her grandparents, my in-laws, who are in their 80s, and they live up on Redwood Hill on 65 acres. And got them out that night. It was all very hectic and whatnot, but we all made it safely out, but we did lose both of those homes that night. What's interesting moving forward to know is that my mother and my father-in-law has dementia. So a lot of people, I'm also a realtor, so after the fires, I sold a lot of fire lots, and a lot of people that were elderly and just basically didn't want to rebuild because it was too stressful. It's very stressful. It's not for the weak-hearted. I mean, just pretty much laying it on the line there. But for elderly people, it's even more difficult. But my mother-in-law was on a mission. She wanted to rebuild the exact same house because they built it to retire in it. And with my father-in-law having dementia, it would help him to know and be familiar with the house. So we actually hired two different contractors so that we made sure that they had a contracting company that was full service and had a lot of people working on their projects. So when you talk about having lulls in it, we would have that because we went with a more custom builder, but having a larger crew is always something in rebuilding to think about when you're hiring your contractor, to make sure that they have a crew. They're not, overextended on a lot of different projects, because that's what slows down your process when you are rebuilding. So they have, I'm happy to say, last December, they moved into their house. They did have a decorator that helped them down to making their beds for them and everything. Yeah. So they were fully in. Last Christmas, they got in, and we also were back in our house as well.
Mm-hmm. But it was all the same, and
yes.
It was very helpful.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. So fast forwarding a little bit to what happened when the Wall Bridge fire hit this year, when that fire came through. Unfortunately, we have a big ranch up in Healdsburg that's been in the family for many generations. And when the fire started up there, one of our cousins was up on the ranch working and saw the lightning strike hit. And it started on a neighboring ranch, and unfortunately it spread over to ours. So we probably had 75% of the ranch burn. Yeah, right around there. So
and talk about a trigger right there. I mean, yeah.
Right. We sat through, the Wallbridge fire, knowing that our ranch was on fire, not knowing if the cabins that had been date back to the early 1900s would make it or not, which I don't know how they did, but they did. Yeah. So, and dealt with that fire. And then we get over that little hump and along comes the glass fire. And one of my biggest supporters throughout the whole rebuilding process has been my sister. Take a deep breath. But
yes, she unfortunately lost her home.
Mhm.
So you understand what she's going through.
Yeah.
And
this
it's
is
hard.
part of that emotion. Like, I'm so okay all the time and I don't get emotional, but it's like, well, all of a sudden this wave hits you and you're like,
And
okay,
that-
I'm
yeah,
back. I'm good. But yes, so they lost their home and they lost their olive oil ranch that they have, but most of the orchard, I think, made it. But yeah, so that was pretty traumatic to do that. So yeah, so we've had quite a few family members. Unfortunately, we've lost 3 family homes to the wildfire, and our ranch was partially destroyed. So
And each time it like adds to almost like, it's like you get almost, there's a lot of emotions, but it's like you almost get mad that like the fire is taking so much away from you. Like first our home and then our ranch and then our family's property. And it's just like, it makes you almost mad. And you're like, why am I mad? And then you'll be like crying one time, and you know, it's just like an array of emotions. And it's just this grief process. It's not sequential. It's just, I don't know, it hits everyone.
roller coaster ride.
Yeah, it hits everyone differently. And I think it's very important to know that like people who just recently lost their home, that like it's, I don't know, it'll hit you when it hits you, and you just have to go with it. And honestly, with time it does help, but it's, I mean, every time fire season comes around, it still is it's a trigger.
It's the, I mean, moving back into the house and being back here, we rebuilt in the same spot, and you know, coming back, it's always going to be yeah, I mean, my husband said the other day, he goes, summer used to be my favorite time of the year.
Yeah.
He goes, it's now winter
I
when
know.
rain hits.
I agree.
So that we're like, okay, we're safe, we're good. So it all changes in that way. But you know, going towards a little more of the positive sides of what we did. So after the fires, a couple of things that I think people should know that are really, really helpful. Unfortunately, with COVID, I feel so bad for the glass fire survivors, because with COVID on top of it, it's a nightmare. But what really, really helped me was truly the United Policyholder meetings, all of the workshops that they do. I know they're all online. Sarah and I actually worked at the glass fire, helping people at the booth there. And you know, they have really, really good workshops in helping you through negotiating process with insurance companies. Their tips that they have in there are extremely helpful, and it's something that I think everyone should really take advantage of. The other thing,
I mean, we had people come in that were like teenagers that were like going in for their parents, because people just don't know what to do, which is understandable. I mean, when you don't ever expect this to happen to you.
Right.
And so there was somebody who was literally like 14, and he came in on his mom's behalf and was asking about insurance, and it's like, wow, like I don't know, that was crazy.
So it's a good organization, and I think it's very, very helpful for that. The other thing that happened in our neighborhood, so I represent Wilshire Heights, Crystal Drive, Heights Road. There's, I think, literally 100 homeowners that are here, which I never really even realized we had that many on this street here. And after the fires, Wilshire Heights started a little newsletter that was going around them. And then Ann Dubé is in our neighborhood, and she's part of Sonoma County, the infrastructure part. I can't think of what Ann does. I'm so sorry, Ann. But anyway, she's big in there. So so she reached out from the top of Heights Road and said, you know, we should kind of collaborate and pull everyone together. So we started this newsletter that now covers all of Crystal Drive, from the bottom on Wilshire all the way to the top. And so then that's when Ann, I think, talked to you and had asked if I could be the block captain for the neighborhood. So I became the block captain, and I went to all the, that's when we started going to all the meetings with Susan Gorin, and then learning all about peer MD, all the infrastructure, the rebuilding process. And then I would come back and take Ariel's copious notes and copy and paste them and send out to the neighborhood. And I think they kind of thought I was writing the notes, but I'm like, no, these are Ariel's notes. But anyway, I shared the neighborhood and all the links and everything. And I still am doing that. And the neighborhood, I have people come up to me all the time that never even respond really on the emails, but they'll come up and say, those are so helpful.
Mhm.
So that has been a huge help in the process of rebuilding, is sharing all that information. And just the other day, someone shared with us that he had someone come out and clean his solar panels. And he goes, you know, after all these fires that we've had and all the dust and dirt that's happened, they're building up on the solar panels and they're not going to be as efficient.
Mhm.
So he shared the company and how much he paid for it. And now I guarantee everyone around here is calling him up to get their panels cleaned. But that's what the neighborhood does. We share contractors, we share tips, we share don't do this. And, you know, it's actually been a huge support group and really proactive for the neighborhood, having this neighborhood newsletter that goes out.
Mhm.
So that's been really good. So I think we should also quickly share our first Christmas, what it was like at the rental.
Numbing.
So-
I don't know.
So what's really interesting, especially the first year, was that we were all in a fog. Nobody could really, nobody wanted Christmas. We didn't
Yeah.
want it. We were mad. We were angry. We were in a
Yeah.
fog. We wanted it just to go away.
Yeah.
And my annoying friends just kept asking what they could do to help. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really have a brain in my head anymore. I can't do anything. And so they came over and they would give me stuff. And it was interesting. They gave me beautiful Christmas ornaments and various things to put in the house, because I couldn't bring myself to go in and buy anything because there was nothing that could compare to, we're really big with Christmas. And so there was nothing that really compared. And the best thing was that this one friend of mine packed up all of her ornaments. Because I ride horses, she's into horses. She packed up all of her horse ornaments and put them beautifully in this box, dropped it off at a church and said, you need to go pick that up, because she lives out of the area. She goes, she shipped it up and she said, go pick up that box, it's for you. And I was like, oh gosh, that means I got to get a tree. That means I got to do this. It means I actually have to get into the Christmas spirit. And the church was calling me going, would you please come pick up this box? Like this lady packed this up. This is so nice. You need to come get it. So they didn't have any empathy for me. It was like, just come up here and get this box. And so then when I went to go get the tree, I'm like, oh, now we have to get a Christmas tree. Well, the first year that we built our house we built 23 years before it burned down. And our first year in the house, we went and we bought a Douglas fir, we decorated it live, and then we planted it. And so fast forward 23 years later, Tubbs fire hits, and of course the firs never make it. So the fir burned down. So our first Christmas, we went out and we bought a beautiful blue spruce, which is not at all native to the neighborhood or the area, but we bought it, and that's what I decorated it with. So it is now planted in the front,
Yeah.
with beautiful little lights on it, and it looks very pretty. So, that's, I think getting a tree, knowing that I was getting something that would be able to, be planted and just, I don't know, had a purpose.
Yeah.
Versus just a cut tree. That was huge. That was
Mhm.
really huge to do that. So I think that's about our, what
Yeah.
we have and what we had to share.
But like with time, I think it's very important though. Like with time, like now it's exciting. Like Christmas for the first time is exciting again, but it took 3 years. And like, I mean, I'm not trying to be a downer, but it takes a long time, but it truly, like time does truly heal. And everyone has their own grieving process, but like this year was the first year they're like decorating and like listening to music, and I never thought I'd be like that again.
Okay, let's be real. She doesn't like to help decorate. I always was a decorator, and she would be like, "Oh God, here comes Mom," because I'm neurotic. I love Christmas everywhere. So, but this year she actually did it, so it wasn't.
But yeah,
And I think also also the last thing I want to share quickly and just touch on, because I had children that were in college when we lost our house. You know, you guys are both down there. I think it's really important that people realize that even though they're not here during the fire and they didn't experience the actual fire themselves, the loss that they have and being away and you can talk to that, and not being around people that, you know, that have been through this kind of a tragedy, it's really hard.
Yeah, like I was so torn because I had to finish up my schooling at Chapman, but I just wanted to be home with people who understood what it felt like, because nobody there after 2 weeks, I mean, it's news and it's gone and people are over it. And I come home and pretty much everyone's lost their home and they get it. And then I had to go back to people who, like, it was almost like I was a sob story and I felt guilty for, you know, feeling sad or upset or anxious or whatever. So it's so true. Like, community does really help with the healing process, because
yeah, I agree. But I think also just sharing that, you know, for parents, if you've got children that are in college who are coming back to homes, it's really important to utilize, and of course with COVID, it's game changer. It's totally different, but there are services at the college. Just, you know, have them talk to counselors, have them talk to someone. Because
I had a lovely counselor who, weirdly enough, she had a house that burned down, so it really worked out. But definitely utilize the services that they offer.
I really want to thank you both for sharing your experiences. A really powerful message of what helped you to move through recovery. And I'll try to capture some of the themes after we've had heard from Lynn and Nick. And now I want to introduce it's my honor to introduce a good friend of mine, Lynn Garric, who sadly lost her house 3 years ago. And Lynn, share your story.
So I live up in the Upper Marquist watershed, and I lost my home and the cottage that I rented to my very good friend, and the 60-foot private bridge, which was the only access to my property. I think a couple other things if you don't know me, this had been my home for 35 years. And I'm 71 years old. So I started out by rebuilding the bridge, which is now an 80-foot bridge because it had to span the creek. That took a year. It took another year to construct the house. I'm working on the last, I wasn't able to rebuild the house and the cottage, so I built kind of a combo house that I share with my friend and tenant. And now I'm working on a workshop. So I feel very, very lucky to be back here. I also feel very lucky to be in this meeting this evening, because even though we think we've learned a lot, I've learned a lot from everybody that's spoken this evening. I'm going to look at Wendy's slides again because I thought they were fantastic. The learning doesn't end. If we're lucky, we just keep learning. And I appreciate that about being part of this group. So I was going to talk about a few things that helped me get through the journey. Personally, there were 4 things I wanted to touch on. One was I found it very hard dealing with agencies and organizations, well-intentioned people, and even the weather, because oftentimes I thought I was going to get something and then those promises weren't kept. So rather than becoming very angry or immobilized by that disappointment, I came up with a mantra. And my mantra for me was keep high hopes and low expectations. And so when people said, we're the Army Corps of Engineers, we can build you a bridge, ma'am. It's like, okay. And then when it was, sorry, we're not building your bridge. Okay. High hopes, because I needed to keep believing in people. I needed to believe that they meant what they said, that they were well-intentioned, so that I could keep trusting people. But low expectations, because everybody wants to promise you something and not everybody can deliver, and that's just life. So I needed that mantra to keep moving on, and that was very helpful to me. Another thing that Wendy touched on that was extremely important that we talk about is self-care, and how it's really individual, and important that we learn what that means for us uniquely, and then figure out how to put that into practice. So I'm one of those, what you called a go mode people, or Brad talked about being a type A person. Make a list, have lots of tasks, keep at work. I felt like I needed to be at my property every day. This is 40 acres. There's a lot going on up here. And I came up every day to work. I needed to learn to put my to-do list down and just enjoy being here. Because for me, being outside, being in nature, that's what brings me exquisite joy. And if I don't learn to put my list down, I don't get that joy. So one of the things for me was about self-care was to learn to put the list down. Or what I also did was I made a list of fun things, so that when I got stressed, I had another list to go to, and I took one of the fun things off the list, and it might have been, I'm going to get out of the county, go to San Francisco, or I'm going to go to the beach. But I did have my fun list. When I was not feeling good, I couldn't remember what to do, but I had a list and I could do things off my list. I'm good at that. I think the other thing is just how much I did use my network of good friends and family. And I'm really sure I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them, be here back at the property. So I think those things, learning to lower my expectations of others, and practicing gratitude, which was amazing because it's always available if you can tap into it. So practicing gratitude was one of those things that could help me change my mood, and was really an amazing gift that we all have. The third thing that was really important to me, because it's who I am and because it gets results, is just about perseverance. I would try to say another mantra, my 3 Ps: be polite, be patient, but persevere. Because nobody loves my land like I do. Nobody knows my land like I do, and nobody's going to fight for it like I can. So I don't care if you're PG&E or the insurance company or the bank or the contractor. I am just going to keep grinding until I get what I think I deserve. And if it takes a long time, like it took over a year for me to get debris cleanup, honestly, the time was usually a good thing, and it usually produced a better result than my initial anxious, let's get it done. So I'm okay with things taking a long time, but as you know, Susan, I will come back.
and back. And
I think the last thing for me when I was thinking about this and what helped me get through it is that I had to have a purpose. This is really hard work, this recovery business, this rebuild business. And I don't think I would have been able to do it if I didn't have a sense of purpose and a clear picture of why I was working so friggin' hard. So I like to picture my property 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. I like to think about my kids and my grandkids being able to be here and enjoying it as much as I do. So another one of those teary moments. Ariel asked if there was anything we wished we'd known ahead of time. And other than I wish I knew where my water pipes had been, that would have been helpful. Now I have a map of where my water pipes go and how they go from the well to the tank and back to the house and where the septic is. And I've got maps now. So, but other than that, I think for me, ignorance was really bliss. I took on things that I didn't know were going to be hard. I took on things that if I thought about it might have seemed impossible, but I took them on as a challenge because I really didn't know. And I'm glad I didn't know. And that's one of the things that scares me about fires in the future is now that I know how hard this is, it's not quite so easy to jump in with both feet, but I'm sure that I would do that again. In terms of the holidays, I had to call my adult children to ask what we did that year because I have no memory of the 2017 holidays whatsoever. And it was interesting to learn that what we did are the things that we love. So Thanksgiving Day, I hiked all over my property. I was up and down the hills, looking at every square inch of it, having a good time, just enjoying it, being outside and hiking. It was kind of rainy, misty, I think. And then I had to call my son and daughter-in-law to say, what in the heck did we do for Christmas? And they said, we went to the beach. We took the dogs, we went to the beach, we hiked at the beach, and it was a great day. And now that I have that memory, it was a great day. So the other thing about the holidays, and Susan knows who my partner on Zoom meetings is right here. That's great.
What a big boy.
A big boy with 1.5 ears because he was lost in the Tubbs fire October 8th. We found him on December 4th. So as far as the holidays were concerned, this was my big Christmas gift from 2017, and I don't think I'll ever forget that. It's been a journey. It's been a good one. My land actually, I know this, people don't, I shouldn't even say this, but the truth is, my forest is healthier than it's ever been because it has fewer trees. It still needs a lot of work, but I'm very grateful for what I've learned, and I'm really happy that those experiences can be helpful to other people. And I'm right up here in the glass fire community and really, really happy to work with my friends and neighbors up here. That's my story.
And I was so glad that your house, your rebuilt cottage combo survived the glass fire, because I was very nervous that the fire was going to come whipping through there and the Mark West community again. I think we all were nervous about the trajectory of that fire. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing your experiences and your valuable lessons. I did inadvertently skip over the video message from one of our other fire survivors, Yoshida, also from the Mark West area, really close to Lysbeth Wiggins. She's in the process of rebuilding her house. And Ariel, if we're ready, why don't you share that video?
Hi, my name's Lisa Yoshida, and my husband and I lost our home in the Tubbs fire. We live in the Foothills, which is off of Reebley and Brush Creek Road. So we lost our home in the first part of the Tubbs fire on October 8th. So I wanted to share a little bit about what I found to be helpful to get through a loss like that. I don't think you can ever fully get over it. I feel like it's the equivalent of losing a family member. Our home was built by my husband's family back in the 70s, and we lived in the house 20 years ourselves, and our kids were raised there. So it's very difficult. But my thoughts are, take your time. Really take time off if you can. You need some time between you and the event. Allow yourself not to do everything, even though, like for us, there was a compulsion to start the rebuilding process that helped us stay sane, but other things are going to have to come off of your list. Because you can't do everything you did before and rebuild a house and deal with insurance and all those sorts of things. So you're going to have to recalibrate. I had to learn how to say no. So I was on a board chair of a nonprofit, and I had to quit that, which was hard to do, but it's just, you have to prioritize. And then if you're going to rebuild, and it's a very personal decision for everyone, and obviously a financial decision, we decided to rebuild mostly on faith rather than evidence. But At a certain point, you kind of have to use the 80-20 rule, that if you get 80% of it right, you're doing great, because you can drive yourself crazy looking at Instagram kitchens and just second guessing yourself. So you just kind of have to trust yourself and allow for some mistakes. Go to the captain's meetings. They were helpful. Also, just from an emotional standpoint, it was nice to hear other people's stories, and usually you were inspired coming out of them, because there's always somebody who had it worse than you, and the stories of resilience are amazing. Aside from that, just on a personal note, I didn't, feel the need for therapy, but or really that it didn't fit me. But I did find an art journaling class that has been kind of the equivalent for me and fits my personality better. And honestly, everything I do, really before COVID, though it's been suspended, everything I've worked on in that class is about the fire. It's really helped me process that, but that took some time. It took me about 1.5 years to kind of go back to that. Really, after all that horrible stuff you have to go through with insurance and permitting and all that stuff, I finally had the time to address sort of things going on with me. So anyway, be kind to yourself and each other. It's a slog, but there is good things on the other side. Thanks.
I want to thank all 4 of you, actually 5 of you, for sharing your stories. And there's such important themes that have emerged in your stories, is that you all are survivors, and you all managed to do it through grit, determination, perseverance, and ultimately faith that you could get through it. But we discovered when we lost our home that you essentially take on 3 or 4 full-time jobs trying to navigate through the debris cleanup, the insurance morass that still is not complete for me. If you're part of the PG&E lawsuit, that's another step forward. Permitting, you've all mentioned that. Just the decisions you need to make in designing and building a home. Everybody says, oh, I get to have a redo. It's so exciting. And you never anticipate the time and the emotionally wrenching decisions that you have to go through, saying, sure, I want this kind of a beige countertop or this gray countertop. It probably doesn't matter, but it's like, don't make me decide. So all of you made the decision to rebuild. And so you ultimately made the decision on faith and perseverance. But I want to thank everybody for making the internal decision whether or not they wanted to rebuild. It takes a lot of time, a lot of determination, and some runway, because it takes a couple of years to get through the process. Not everybody made the decision to rebuild. And that was the right decision for you, to purchase a home elsewhere, to move out of the county, to be closer to family. Very personal decisions. And ultimately, I think, congratulations, you made the right decisions for you. Nick, what do you make of all of these stories? And thank you so much for being here. The Hanna Institute has really been focusing on adverse childhood experiences, but here we have all these adults going through these adverse experiences that will just keep rolling out for the next number of decades. So where do we take that?
Well, we're just big kids. That's the way I think of it. I'm still kind of stuck in middle school when I think about where I'm at. Yeah, and so it's also adverse community experiences, right? And I want to start by just acknowledging all of your survivorship, Brad, all the Wigginses, even you, Susan. I mean, you technically lost 2 homes in the 17 fires. I remember talking with you about that. Like that, there's a lot that comes with that. And what Lynn shared, and I think that what Lynn brought up is really a huge part of it is how do you dream the future, that future orientation and staying future focused? Because oftentimes we kind of put the blinders on and we can't. So how do we do that? And it reminds me of a study on high performance athletes, and they just focus on 10%. Right? They can only do what's right in front of them, and eventually they'll get to the mountain of stuff, but just focusing on the 10%, they'll eventually get to 100%. And that's where I've seen a lot of people do it, also because it's just too stressful, both the good stress and the bad stress. Because sometimes, as my mom used to say, you've had too much birthday. You can be too happy when it comes out. But making plans, making sure we celebrate the traditions that we've been doing, or making new ones. What rituals do you have in your life? Like, how do you keep those rituals? And the community care, like your self-care is really tied into that. And I think that's what I'm hearing thread around through Brad's stories, the Wiggins stories, Lynn's story, and having that community, because without the community, your self-care kind of, we don't live in caves. Most of us don't anyway. So I think with that being said, if you could start sharing the slide deck, Ariel. We're 4 years in, we're bathing in cortisol at this point in time. Plus we've been talking about stories for an hour. You think about cucumbers, they're about 70% water, 30% mass, similar to the human body. So we're really just cucumbers with anxiety. So I think about the first thing is we're in wine country. Despite popular belief, most alcohol is a depressant, unless you're in tequila or mezcal. But basically everything else is a depressant. So how do we keep hydrated? How do we keep that water in us? Because we're also emotional human beings, and emotions are contagious. But that being said, good drinking your water, Brad. I ran out maybe 10 minutes ago. But if you can switch to the next slide, Ariel, there's some great science out there. Ooh, too far. Thank you. So this is some great work that came out almost 10 years ago looking after a disaster. And even though we're 4 years in, really, right? So we just keep riding this wave. If you look on the left-hand side on the graph, you'll see as dysfunction goes up, dysfunction gets more extreme as you go up, but great health is near the bottom. PTE stands for potential traumatic event. And ultimately, there's 4 waves of people, right? So initially, we're at 4 different levels, but if you look over 1 to 2 years, a lot of it tapers down, right? The bulk of the population actually goes back down. Even the delayed one that kind of like creeps up, because those are the people who are like, no, I'm fine. I'm gonna do 12-hour days. But 2 years later, your body's like, I'm shutting down. No, thank you. They eventually go down as well. So for most of us, we're gonna recover, even though it feels hard over time. Kind of like, and I forget what your name was, one of the Wigginses. We're talking about
Sarah.
It takes time. Sarah, thank you. It does take time because over time you replace them with memories. But things do actually remind us of things. And everyone kind of hearken to that, right? If you can flip to the next slide, Ariel. So there is hope. And the one thing that isn't going to lie, honestly, is our heartbeat and our breath. And it's okay if your heart rate goes up, right? I can feel it in my face usually. I get flush. But it's about your heart rate going back down. The problem is if our heart rates stay up that long, we're gonna have some problems. And so you're gonna see like your fine motor skills start deteriorating. You can't listen, you can't hear, you can't think linearly, right? And then as your heart rate keeps going up higher and higher and higher and higher, some gnarly things happen. We don't have to go into that, but basically it's about how do you listen to your heart? Like there's this mindful movement, but you don't want to be full in your mind. That's what makes it hard to sleep. We want to be heartful. Like how do we listen to our heart and how we're affected in our interactions as we're recovering and growing and healing to move forward? Because there's no really bouncing back. We have to bounce forward. And so what are the ways to do that? If you can move to the next slide, Ariel. And the tricky thing is, we all talked about it. What are those triggers? What is that psychological trauma, which is the technical name for it? And I don't use trauma with a big T loosely. I don't like to use it that way, but if you could flip to the next slide, Ariel. Psychological trauma is like the big nothing from the Never Ending Story. I'm a child of the 80s. It's that black cloud that like Something happens and you go, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it sounds like. I don't know how to name it. And it leaves us feeling like we have a loss of control, like we're super vulnerable. We feel immobilized. We feel betrayal, even when it's not betrayal, just because we're kind of swimming in that cortisol, and increased appraisal, right? We're constantly looking for a threat. And that's when the winds pick up. That's when your neighbor lights a charcoal grill and you run to the window because you don't know what's happening. And that's also when, if you think back to that kind of the incident command of the PTE, the post potential traumatic event, those are the people that, even if they weren't near the fires, they sometimes have what's called survivor's guilt. And so they're gonna have it even worse than those that were directly affected, because they feel bad for it, but they also are like, why am I still here? How can I be here? And there are big, really philosophical and heartfelt reasons for that. If you can flip to the next one, Ariel. So Maslow, in his great hierarchy of needs, he actually spent time with the Blackfoot Nation. I don't know if you all knew that, which is what he based his Maslow hierarchy of needs on, right? But he based it on the lens of this like rugged individualism and Americana of like pull yourself up by the bootstraps. So it was like physiological needs, safety needs, belongingness and love was third. But we know that that doesn't really make sense, especially I was a kid who came from a poor family. We didn't have a lot of things, but we had love and belongingness. There was this sense of like something that rooted us deeper. And so a few years ago, they kind of debunked it and said, no, he got it wrong. The base of it is actually spirituality, and then love, belongingness, and then that shelter safety stuff is up there. We as people, what we saw post 2017 was whether you are a native or you are a Sonomad, which is what I am. I moved in 2015. We love our space and our place. We have a connection to the land. Like the things become part of the scenery. Our Christmas decorations, all of that is ambiance, but that's part of our spirituality. The root of spirit in Latin means breath. All of that affects our breath, right? Which ties into our heart rate. So we're actually connected to our space and place, and that's what's important to us. We want to be here for a reason, which is why we stayed. We decided to stay. But it's our spiritual root to this space and to our community, and it connects us because we couldn't really live in isolation for those of us who were anymore. In my neighborhood, none of us really talked. It was an older neighborhood, Sonoma Valley on Park Avenue, 0 cell phone service. But through next door, actually, we all started talking and getting together, and it was said, we love this street. How can we help each other? We were running lasagna to the elders that couldn't get out of their house. Kind of like Brad was sharing, like we hunkered in and said, let's do this together, because that's how we survive. And that's what we as humans have been doing for thousands upon thousands of years. If you'll go to the next slide, Ariel. And the key is this thing called the vagus nerve. I've lived in Vegas twice. Despite popular belief, what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. It will follow you home. So much like the vagus nerve, what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. And this magical nerve that ebbs and flows through your body is like tributaries and rivers in North America. So when we get stressed, that's when we get super puffy, right? That's when we get gnarly arthritis, because our stress is held in our body. The issue is in the tissue, as my mentor says. But by breathing and doing these exercises that trigger this vagus nerve, we actually help the vagus nerve go and expand. It helps with blood flow and oxygen flow through our body and helps release that stress. Water is great. All those 5 things that Wendy mentioned earlier, love, exercise, laughter, all of that stuff helps with that vagus nerve. Any sort of like singing in a group, swimming, a lot of bikers in Sonoma County. So all these things are tapping into this literally age-old science that helps us regulate and be in real time. This is an awesome photo from the bottom of the pelvic floor looking up, which I love. That's the vagus nerve kind of wandering up you. Ariel, will you go to the next slide, please? So the big question, as I talked about the heart, this is something called the subjective units of distress scale. No one can tell you how stressed you are. One thing we saw after the fires was, people were stressed out, and other people were like, well, you're not that stressed. And you're like, oh, yes, I am. Don't tell me I'm not stressed, right? Because they actually were pretty high up there. So here in this group, whoever's on Facebook out there and Al Gore's the internet, if you can think of how distressed you are currently, I've been talking to you for probably 3 minutes. We've been here for an hour. It's the end of the day. It's Thursday. I have 2 littles under 5. I somehow missed the nighttime regimen beyond bath times. But if you can register with your heart and your body, where on a scale of 0 to 10 would you feel distress? Like, how distressed are you currently? And you can keep your inside voice inside. You don't have to share with anybody. I'd say go with the first one because it's probably right. Do you have a score? Give me a thumbs up if you have a score. I can only really see 6 of us. Cool. So now go to the next slide, Ariel. So what we're going to do is I'm going to teach you a small song with 3 sets of motions, and then we're going to do a breathing exercise, because that's how I got through, is using the arts and some shenanigans. You can keep your microphone off, so don't worry. So this is a simple song. It's nonsensical toddler speak. And it goes like this. The first chunk goes dum dum da 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 dum dum da da dum dum da 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 dum dum da da. It's simple. It repeats. So we can do it all together. You're on mute. I'll just keep rambling. 5, 6, 7, 8. Dum dum da 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 dum dum da da dum dum da 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 dum dum da da. Second part repeats as well. It goes dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 da. Simple enough, right? So do the second part. 5, 6, 7, 8. Dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 da. Third part, or the last third for you math geeks out there, just goes dum dum da 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 dum dum dum. And I give you a license on the dum dums to get as weird as you want to. Get Sonoma weird, as someone told me once. So you go, everyone together. 5, 6, 7, 8. Dum dum da 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 dum dum dum. And that's it. Now I'll teach you the 3 motions that go with it. First one, super simple. We're always going to clap in the front twice. So we go dum dum da 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 da. Then slap your thighs twice. Dum dum da da. Repeat dum dum da 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 dum dum da da. Dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 dum dum dum. That's the first round. Got it? Second round, dum dum da 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 da. Always come back to the claps in the front. Then you're going to cross your arms and try to high five the person in the Zoom box on the side of you. Dum dum da da, dum dum da 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 da. Other side da da, dum dum da 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 da, dum dum da 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 da. You got it, da 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 da, dum dum dum. Awesome. Second round. The third round is dum dum da 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 da. 2 claps in front. Cross your hands again. Grab a nose, grab an ear. Dum dum da da, dum dum da 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 da. Other side da da. Dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 dum dum dum. Cool. You ready to get Sonoma weird? We're gonna do it all together. I was a jazz and opera major, so we'll be at a nice like bossa nova, like you're on the beach in Brazil beat. Cool. So we'll go 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. Dum dum da 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 dum dum da da dum dum da 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 dum dum da da dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 dum 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 da da da. High five your friend. Dum dum da 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 da. High five your friend. Dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 dum dum da 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 dum dum dum. Dum dum da 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 da. Grab an ear, grab a nose. Dum dum da 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 da. Grab the other ear. Dum dum da 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 da. Dum dum da da da. Dum dum da da da. Dum dum dum. That was it. Super simple. And the point of that is to feel absurd. So if you did it right. You're not alone in that. So the next thing I want to do is just teach you a simple breathing exercise. It's called 3-6 breathing or complete breathing. The point is to inhale for a count of 3 and exhale for a count of 6. Double it. If you're a singer or a swimmer and have a big diaphragm, you could make it bigger, but I want to start with that. I just say that you sit comfortably with your lower back supported by your chair and your feet grounded. And we'll do 3 sets. I'm a little winded. So we'll breathe once, 3-6, breathe normally for a little while, do another one, breathe normally, and then breathe a third time. And then I'll explain what just happened. So what I'll do is I'll lead you in the same way. I'll say, will you please breathe in, and 5, 6, 7, 8, breathe in, 2, 3, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and get all the breath out and stop. And that was your freebie. So we'll do 3 rounds. You don't have to close your eyes. One of the things is, if depending on how the story of your life may be, closing your eyes is pretty scary for people. So don't close your eyes. If you're starting to do a meditative practice, just find a place across the way to gently tilt your gaze. And we'll do this 3 times. So we'll breathe in 5, 6, 7, 8, breathe in, 2, 3, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, get the last bit of breath out, get it out and rest, breathe normally. Make sure we're not breathing into our chest, so it's eating our chins. I have a couple under this beard. Make sure we're breathing down into our belly and we're relaxing. And so we'll do that again. Make sure your lower back support and your feet are planted. And so we're gonna breathe in 5, 6, 7, 8, breathe in, 2, 3, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, get the last bit of breath out and rest. This time, if you feel any tension anywhere in your body, maybe breathe into that and then breathe it out when you exhale. And try to get all that breath out. And we'll do it one last time. And I'll bring you in 5, 6, 7, 8, breathe in, 2, 3, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and let all your breath out, let it out, let it out. And inhale again. And now if you check back in with that SUD scale from before, where are you at now? From a level of 0 to 10, did it stay the same? Did it go down? Did it go up? If it went up, just give me a thumbs up. If it went down, go down. If you're like, I think I'm the same, you can stay there. Chill as a cucumber. Awesome. 3 minutes. You can do that anywhere. You can do that at one of our infamous Sonoma 4-way stops because no one's taking the initiative to go. You can take it, it's 3 minutes. And there's a reason behind that. You just tapped into that vagus nerve, which is getting all that breath out, and then your diaphragm was hitting your pelvic floor and going and shooting back up and expanding the vagus nerve. But Ariel, can you show my last slide? Well, I guess second to last slide. So this is the human brain. Thanks to the glorious fMRI machines from the decade of the brain in the 90s, we put someone in an fMRI machine and then said, hey, think of the scariest memory you've ever had, which is a horrible thing to ask anyone. So as that fMRI was going, chunk, they watched in real time as the blood flowed out of the left hemisphere of this brain, which is obviously not to scale, into the right hemisphere of the brain, and then out of the right hemisphere back into the right hindquarter where that beautiful garden is. And what that means is that you couldn't execute or engage any of the parts of the right or left hemisphere. So if you look at the right hemisphere, it's like all those social connections, right? The arts, outside, drawing, you're flying a kite, then you've got like the couple in the middle that are looking over at the left side going, do we want to go there? I don't know. The cubicle doesn't look that fun. And the left-hand side is all those L words: linear thought, logic, language, perhaps the most notorious, listening, lists. So when their blood is recruited back here, we can't engage any of those things, right? We can't listen, we can't do any of that. Because it's back here and we're living in the past, and it's based on survival, and it's not bad. It helps us survive, but if we stay there too long, we won't be able to engage and we won't be able to connect and we can't listen and we can't grow. But there's a magical few things we can do that almost instantaneously reintegrates that blood throughout our brain. And we just did it together and it took 3 minutes. And there's a little section above the left ear that you can engage using 3 things. And the first is movement, right? This is when you say you had a dicey conversation and you couldn't come up with a witty comeback and you take 3 steps out the door, breathe. Oh, I could have said this, that, right? So movement helps us, exercise, dancing. I have little kids, I play with them all the time. There's a lot of mermaids and pirates in my house currently. But also singing, vocal tone. So we just sang, even speaking, right? Telling your story, having a conversation, sing in the shower, sing in the car. Sonoma choice, like live your life, live your The Voice dreams, but it will integrate your blood instantaneously. Sing with your family, sing around the fire. And the third is symbology. So journaling, writing your stories, right? Lynn was talking, I think it was Lynn, you were talking about your art journal, right? Or no, it was the woman in the video. It's doing that, right? So you're actually able to tie into memory and thought and go, how do I actually feel? How can I put a word with it? But those three things, that we do them constantly, we're gonna counteract all this stress on us. And that's how I spend all my days. My little kiddo was 1 year old during the 2017 fires, and I've since had a second one. And so they keep me young, but I play with them constantly. And the idea that keep your traditions and your rituals and your arts and your language, keep it going, because that's what makes us healthy. If you go to the next slide, Ariel, we did a study of the Latinx community in Sonoma Valley after the 17 fires because they had a healthier life expectancy than the other parts of our community, because they still get together and they celebrate that culture and that arts, and they sing and they move and they eat food and they jive and they have a good time. And I wanted to share this. Every indigenous culture has an orientation to learning, and that orientation is metaphorically represented in its art forms, its way of community, its language, and its way of understanding itself in relationship to the natural environment that contexts or cradles it. We've been coming together in ways that I think the county hasn't before, because all these things are there. And I think were it not for that, I don't think we'd be doing as well as we have been during COVID as community members, but we are still leaving one demographic behind just because they need extra help. If you go to my last slide, Ariel, and it's the kiddos. We got to figure that out. And this is a great book that came out during the 2017 fires. My oldest was, I want to say 16 months old when he started using this. And it's animal archetypes, which we've been using for thousands of years as teachers, because they're never not true to their character. It's free online, check out the link above. But basically it's a porcupine talking to different animals in the forest and their personification of what happens when they're scared. And this is great on adults too, by the way, because oftentimes we can't put it in words. And it goes through the different animal types and you go, oh, today I'm the squirrel when I'm freaked out, or the next time it might be the dog, right? This is in Spanish as well. There's other lessons that come with it, but I wanted to offer this up because I think that, you know, if we, oftentimes when our lists get long, focusing on the kids, because inherently we'll play in ways that we forgot that we like to do again, because that's the way they engage in the world. And so I really wanted to end with that, as like remembering to play and include the kids, because they'll always keep you active and won't let you be serious very long. And that's my chunk.
Thank you, Nick. I love those chunks. And I'm going to be emailing you at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning when I have that earworm drilling through my head of that little snappy song. But let me, really, they're boogieing, they're ready. But let me ask you on a serious note, because just about every fire survivor that I've talked with has real difficulty getting through the night. You wake up at 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, you go over the trauma, you make the list, you have to do X, Y, and Z and X, Y, and Z. What do we do to calm our brain and so that we can get back to sleep?
I would go with turn off any of your digital devices, number one. See if you can get off a digital device 3 hours before you try to go to bed, just because it's going to suck serotonin from your brain, much like the Zooms. But it's just, that blue light is going to mess with your mind. So that would be the step number one, hydration. Number two, I would say in those 3 hours before you go to bed, do that symbology stuff, do puzzle work if you do that, paint, draw, write, move, do stuff that is, you know, all the things that Wendy mentioned earlier, and Brad and the Wiggins and Lynn talked about, because those are all things that are going to help our body relax and get the cortisol out. Broccoli and cauliflower actually hyper-metabolize cortisol. So if you want to do an evening snack, go with the broccoli. I eat it at noon, like 2 handfuls of it, because I'm hoping it'll absorb some of my Zoom. But I would also say any sort of calming music. Play something with a slow beat because it'll, yes, there's the other cat. It'll help regulate your heart, but it is, you know, a tale as old as time. And there's even, you know, white noise. All the cats. maybe I can find a toddler. But I would say use calming music. And we're in the land of cats. Oh, what's Susie getting? How many cats?
Oh, I think she's gonna.
I know. Are you?
No,
May
Okay.
I add
picture of
something to that
one.
question?
Please do, Wendy.
Wendy, go for it.
So sometimes it depends on what it is that's keeping you up. Some of us it's that undercurrent feeling of anxiousness that's there and it's not really going anywhere. And in which case, whatever I can do to get into my body and notice my breathing and breathe in peace and breathe out that stress will get me through that moment. But sometimes if you're like me and you like to get stuck in your head a little bit more, I do at night what's known as the spin cycle, where my head is like it's in the spin cycle of my washing machine. And what it does is it says, well, now that you're quiet enough for me to get your attention, I'm going to replay every conversation you had today with what you should have said in every possible iteration of that, like a choose your own adventure that never ends well, in which you feel terrible at the end. And it goes on and on and on. And that's the spin cycle I'm talking about. And if you're like that, I had a really good mentor of mine tell me, Wendy, you should write that down when that's happening. You should just write it down. And I said, my immediate thought was, that's the stupidest. I'm not going to write it down. I'm already trying to sleep. I'm not dumbest thing ever. I was mad. I was mad at him for saying that. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm trying to sleep. I can just command my brain to shut up. Of course it wouldn't. And so finally one day I'm like, fine, I'm not sleeping anyway. I'm going to write it down. Turned on a light, got the notepad out and started writing down all the things that were bugging me that I was thinking about. And it actually wasn't 50 million things. It was 7 things repeating. It was a much shorter list than I realized. And having written it down, my body felt like I had done something about it and it stopped trying to remind me of it. Just that simple act was like, okay, that's good enough. Now I know you have that saved over there and I'll let it go so you can sleep. So sometimes a trick as simple as that can break you out of the spin cycle if you're stuck there like me.
Thanks, Wendy, Nick, and all of our fire survivors. You're amazing. And my hat's off to you, and you'll keep on inspiring me every day. And if Ariel was live, you would see her 3 cats wrapped around her neck as well. We're in a real cat Zoom today. And so now it's time, and I know we've run a little bit late, but I really want to reach out to our fire survivors and ask them what questions are on your mind, because we have great experts with us tonight. What do you want to know about? Ariel, do we have any questions?
We started with a very small, intimate group. So I'm going to allow anyone that has a question for any of our folks to raise your hand. And I will, take your question, but I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand. I think all of what was shared was really powerful. And I think that this, we had a light attendance tonight, and I think it's because it's December, because it's Thursday, the week before Christmas. But I think all of this is really powerful. And I think it was, as Supervisor Gorin said earlier, that I think this is going to be really helpful for people to refer to, in 3 months. And we do have one. We have Tim McCarthy Smith. So I'm going to allow you to speak, Tim. You should say.
Thanks, Tim, for being with us. What's your question?
It's not a question. I just want to say thank you for this presentation. Susan, your office has gotten a lot of correspondence from me about the state of St. Helena Road. Sorry, not sorry on that. And there's some feedback that I don't, Jim Dirksen, who you probably know well, yes, gave feedback that he doesn't think Cornell's going to dig those wine caves anytime soon. So I'm sorry, I have to use this forum to put in a plug for repaving St. Helena Road, one of the three east-west arteries between Santa Rosa and Sonoma and Napa County. Okay, I'm done there. Thank you so much. I've been in, I'm a Desert Storm veteran. I did 4 deployments to the Middle East before, during, and after Desert Storm, and I never felt that I had a PTSD condition through my military experience. This fire, when I evacuated at 3:30 a.m. on that Monday morning, watching the southern part of my property go up in flames, it's given me a serious level of PTSD that I never had from anything else I've done in my life. And so the insights that Wendy and Nick have shared, I've been taking a lot of notes on them. I've also been going to therapy since then for this sudden onset of PTSD. And I just think this is a really powerful message that's been delivered tonight. And Nick, thank you for the song. I was actually singing and clapping along with you as much as I could. Wendy, thank you for those 5 bullet items that you put up. I think that's great. And I thank the rest of you for sharing your experiences. Lynn, you and I have been chatting for a while now, where I'm in the same neighborhood as Lynn. And yeah, I just think this has been a really powerful presentation. And I hope that it gets shared more, because I think that we as a overall Sonoma County community need more of this kind of information being out there. This year has been a stupid political year, and with the COVID and all, there's just been so much negativity. I think there's a lot of positivity in this presentation that I think should be shared as much as possible. So that's kind of my statement. Is I just wanted to say thank you for this, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the past almost 2 hours now. I'm glad I was able to join this presentation. Thank you, and good night.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you, Tim, so much for sharing that. And I echo that. These are tales of survival and success and finding community, recreating community, finding the best of our community. And yes, I will be working on repaving St. Helena Road. But I want to tell you, there is debris cleanup is horrible on the roads. Rebuilding is even more horrible on the roads. Those concrete trucks weigh a damn ton. So let's get through the rebuilding process as we have from the fires 3 years ago. And we will be looking at repaving some of the roads that have been devastated this year. Absolutely. Ariel is part of that. We have a whole list going on for the road repaving. But I think your message was really powerful. Please let everyone know, the folks that you encounter in your community groups that you're recreating, about the archived video, and especially the tools that Wendy and Nick have shared with us. I'll never quite look at a cucumber the same way, Nick.
That was my goal.
But from the fire 3 years ago, when we had our staff going through the trauma, sharing your trauma, we felt that we needed help. And we invited Wendy in to be a part of our office team, our District 1 team, sharing a lot of her coping mechanisms that she talked about, the deep breathing, and it does work. It's almost like Lamaze going through childbirth. You just feel it again. You just go to the deep breathing and it helps you out. Absolutely. So
Can I ask one question? Because I think Wendy's chart, there was a chart of the stage of recovery. And I think it was like a 2-year stage. I'm just wondering, is there any way to really tailor that to living in a rebuild area? Because it seems like our event certainly happened on one night, but we're going through years of rebuild. And especially for us back in our neighborhoods, that every day we're waking up to construction noise, and we're still living in a rebuild disaster zone. So I'm just wondering what that chart would look like at all if it was extrapolated in our kind of like rebuild story.
So in answer to, so you're looking at what happens after, what comes off the edge of that chart. Where
Right.
does that go from there?
Right.
And well, thank you for asking that, because it was one of the, it's one of the trickier parts of recovery is you focus so much on the goal of I've got to get that house built, and it becomes this holy grail of accomplishment. But the reality is that once you're there, you are now physically in the place where it happened, and your body knows that. And so even though you've done some work on how you're feeling and you've done some processing, you probably have even done some counseling by this point, that's going to come back at that moment, and your body's going to say, okay, I've been hanging on to this one for a minute, but now I need to grieve the loss of what was, and what feels like this place that was safe for me betrayed me. This is the thing that I felt was supposed to protect me, and it didn't. And I need to move that through my body. And so there is a rest of that story, you're right. When you come into a rehoming, as you will, and whether you stay and rebuild or you move, if you move, then what you're grieving is the loss of your neighborhood, because it meant something to be in a community with the people that you would see. And so you grieve that loss when you move. If you stay, then there's a delay on it. But once you're there, we finally hit that goal. And as you said, I got to stay busy and get it done, and I'll get to it later. That's like your body's signal for, okay, it's later. We did it. Guess what? I've been saving up for you. And so, and so that's going to happen. It's going to be there, and it's going to be, especially if you have kids, you're going to see some things happen. They're going to regress a little bit. You're going to see some behaviors. You're like, oh, I thought we were done with that. I guess we're doing that again. Okay. And that
is exactly my point. And I would love, I know, Susan, you're trying to wrap this up, but if there's like an ask as a block captain, if we could continue that discussion, because we're, for some of us, and when you do get back home, we're there now. And we have neighbors who are all kind of going through this next phase that goes beyond that chart. And then we've got new families moving back into the neighborhood who never went through this disaster. And so a lot of us are like, gosh, how do we react to them? Like, do we even want to talk about our feelings in the fire? Because we don't want them to feel what we're feeling, but we are. So I would love to, if there's some resource or some way to continue that uncharted chart discussion with some of us, I would love that.
Brad, yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
was just going to say, what you say is really powerful. You have worked, all of you have worked really hard to recreate the community, rebuild your community, and you have these incredible shared experiences with your neighbors. And I don't necessarily want to volunteer Wendy and Nick, but I'm wondering if there is value that you get on a Zoom with your neighbors, maybe 20 or 30 of you, and sort of go through some of the experiences that that you're feeling, and it doesn't have to be Wendy and Nick, but it might be helpful for you to have another shared experience with a therapist or a trauma expert for that. But I also will say your neighborhood was so devastated, and it was just sort of scraped clean. And your dining room table is now your former tree, but in the Mark West area, and there it is, in the Mark West area, in the Glass Fire area, the St. Helena Road area, there is so much devastation, hundreds, thousands of dead trees. You can do what you can on vegetation clear out, rebuild your house, and every day you will be driving past the charred trees because you literally cannot remove all of the trees from that incredible expanse of land. I know as I was driving over Fountain Grove the last couple of years, I would have people from the Springs area comment to me, why hasn't Fountain Grove cleared out all those dead trees? It's just depressing to drive through there and see the dead trees. And I know I wake up when it's damp out, I can smell the smoke in the air from the charred vegetation from Hood Mountain across the road. So it's the smells, it's the visions. It just triggers us, moves us right back there. It's going to take a long time to recover from that. Wendy, Nick, final thoughts. We do have to conclude tonight, but how do we move forward?
I would say, just to quickly give one thing for Brad to use with his group, but children process it through play. And it's the thing that they have on us that is so far superior to how we do it. And so let them do that, that you'll hear in their play what their trucks and their animals and the things talking, bad fire, and they'll start just playing out what it is they're feeling, and let it ride, let it go, let it be what it is, and play with them. My final thought would be this. One of the things that's really hard about shared grief is this sense of, am I burdening other people that are already in pain by expressing my own? And am I allowed to show joy and experience things that are joyful? Or is that somehow a betrayal of the pain that I'm carrying and that other people are carrying? And what I would say to that is that it is okay for you to do things that bring you joy, because that actually gives those of us who've lost hope that it's possible. And it's not a betrayal of the loss for people around me to feel joy. If anything, joy is like sunlight. When you stand in the sunlight, it doesn't diminish its power on me. So to dim your own light, thinking that that is somehow going to augment mine, it won't. It won't actually help me for you to try to suffer the same way that I am. And so I hope that that people can embrace joy. And I loved what Lynn said about, I made the list. Since I'm good at lists, I made the list of fun things. I made the list of good things, because it's part of reclaiming joy and hope in your life. And it's something that we all deserve to have.
Nick, final thoughts?
How do you follow that? I think Sarah touched on it earlier. It's a spiral. We keep coming back to it, right? It's like an unraveling. It's just kind of, we visit it and it's a little less poignant, but we go past it, but it's harking back. And I think what Wendy said is really profound, not only with the play with kids. I grew up with a mom who was a puppeteer. And so like what she was talking about are these like intermediary objects that kids can speak through and say things that they wouldn't feel normally safe enough to say because they've been conditioned to not be able to say that. And so I think a great way is to express your emotions because our kids as a culture aren't used to adults expressing them in positive ways and normalizing them. And that is a great way to process and give permission because from what we think is dark, and I want to say it was Rumi said, from the dark comes the light. We don't know how to appreciate it. And so how do we, as we're even moving through this COVID period, like instead of a new normal, how do we want to return? Not what do we want to return to, but how do we want to do this? What's the light we want to bring with us and the lessons we learn? So like, we can do this better because why not? And I think that's it. Like, we can change the cycles, not only in our own families, but the generations beforehand and do it together. And so I think encouraging getting together with community in what ways you can that are safe, but just celebrating the good and the bad and knowing that you can create a better future together with that and those celebrations.
I think those are powerful words. We do need to conclude our wonderful conversation tonight. And it is important for our children to play and recreate. Art therapy is truly a gift, but I'm reminded that Lisa Yoshida talked about how important art was for her in restoring. Her artwork may reflect a lot of her experiences, but it is the art of creating. Nick talked about the art of singing and dancing and being joyful. And I may recreate, I may find that I do more than a stick figure at some part in my life, in my future. But for right now, I find solace gardening, working in my yard, planting gardens, watching the earth nurture and restore. That's what gives me solace right now. So I have about 2 acres that begging me to go and recreate some of what was lost on my lot as I rebuild. And I want to encourage all of us to forgive ourselves. I've talked with many, many people who said, I can't believe I forgot this and this. I forgot to grab this. What was I thinking? Breathe. For the most part, it's just stuff that we have successfully replaced. And we have to forgive ourselves, and we have to allow ourselves to experience the journey ahead of us. It's going to be a different journey. We're going to recreate different traditions and recapture what was so perfect in our lives before, which was essentially around our families and friends and community. Thank you, Wendy Wheelwright from Sonoma County Behavioral Health, Nick Dalton from the Hanna Institute, Brad Sherwood from Larkfield, Wickiup area, Lynn, Garric from the Mark West area, Lisa Yoshida from the Mark West area, and of course, Lysbeth Wiggins and Sarah. And I just huge thank you to Ariel for bringing all of your skills and experience to the forefront. We thank you every day for what you provide to us, whether it's your copious notes or your quirky humor or your ability to organize us and bring us forward. We have a terrific team. If you have questions, if you have challenges, reach out to us and reach out to your community. And I love the fact that Lysbeth and Sarah are hugging. I want to give you all virtual hugs, and please enjoy, avoid those gatherings, large gatherings, but enjoy your immediate pods during the holiday season. Thank you. We will recreate that community that is so special for us. Have a wonderful holiday season, and remember those songs. Thanks.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.